Hi guys, it's Rui again, and today I'm really lucky to have our lender partner, Darrel with Diversified Capital Funding with us. So thank you, Darrel. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, the big thing on everyone's mind right now is this looming recession.
Okay.
And I've got a lot of buyers who are like, Rui, what do we do? And I figured this would be the best time to kind of talk to you and kind of hear your thoughts.
Well, I would say the most important thing right now is to just get engaged into the process, right? Well, obviously, we've seen an increase in interest rates, which you think is going to be temporary.
Yeah.
But it's really important to get an understanding, even when you know you're well qualified, to know what you want your payment to be. Because a lot of times, surprisingly, I'll have clients where even in this market, they're qualified for more home than they feel comfortable paying. So it's really important that they know that number. So, obviously, we're in in an area where homes are more expensive. But let's say, for example, somebody's looking at, a $1.5 million house. Are they prepared for what that payment represents? So, and the reason being is that if I tell them what they're qualified for, and I tell them, hey, you can go up to $2 million.
Yeah.
But if they don't not prepare for that payment, it taints the process, right? You show them a $2 million house, they really want something that's $1.3 million.
Yeah.
There's going to be it's going to be much harder to find them that ideal property once they've seen something more expensive. So my thing would be get involved in the process, understand what your payment is, and if there's anything that we need to know in advance, maybe there's a credit issue we need to resolve, things that we can take care of in advance, which sometimes can take weeks to kind of take care of.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of getting the preparation done in advance.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who call me and say, Rui, we want to go and look at this house.
Right.
And we go look at a house. Sometimes I go against my rule, which is I wait to get them qualified. And we'll go look at something and they fall in love with a house.
Right.
And then I find out they don't qualify for it.
Yeah.
And it just puts us in such an awkward position.
Right.
Especially now, interest rates have doubled.
In some instances, yes.
Okay.
And the last time, having done this 30 years, it doesn't really feel like that.
Yeah.
But the last time I can recall something like this happening was in 94, because rates were really good in 93, and we saw rates go up over 2% in like 3 months. And so we've kind of surpassed that over the year. But even back in 94, we did subsequently see interest rates come down relatively quickly over time, the following couple of years thereafter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, people are freaking out because they're like, oh, Rui, interest rates are 7%.
Right.
I think we got spoiled.
Right.
I think over the last decade, interest rates were hovering in that 5 range, 4, 5, maybe 6 right in the beginning.
Right.
And then they started coming down. But I've seen loans, at like $1.5 million, $1.7 million. And I have a lot of clients who are like, well, at $1.7 million with a 7% interest rate, we just can't qualify, even if we're both working.
Right.
And there's all this talk of possible layoffs and all of this.
Right.
But on the flip side, I think that they're able to buy that house that was, 2.5, 3 million before. We're looking at about 2 million, 2.1 million. So prices have come down.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've done this like flyers for some agents. And what's really interesting is where, to your point, we've seen this drop in price and people are only focusing on the increase in rates. Well, when you combine those two together, and you've seen the significant drop in values combined with the increase in rates, ironically, the price is almost the same in terms of a monthly payment.
Wow.
But the benefit of that is that I would rather buy homes right now where the values have come down, because the term that we kind of throw around, we call it marry the home, date the rate. And what that means is that your sales price is finite, right? You know exactly what your sales price is going to be. Your interest rate, however, is temporary. You're going to have a higher loan right now, and there's a very high percentage that very strong likelihood at least, that you're going to be able to refinance that property in the next year or two.
Oh, I love that.
So the benefit is secure that lower price now. Yes, you have that higher rate until you refinance. However, when you think about when rates come down, what that's going to do is the same thing we saw when rates were lower. We're going to start seeing an increase in values at that point. Secure the higher price now. The higher rate right now at the lower price, and then just refinance that, in a year, 18 months.
Wow. So are you telling us some insider information?
Well, no, there's a lot of data to that point. I mean,
Okay.
Fannie Mae, which is pretty much the liquidity source for 30-year fixed mortgages for the lower price amounts throughout the country, they've come out and said they expect rates potentially to be like in the mid 4% range in the next year or two.
Okay.
And they would not come out with that unless that happened. I mean, and consequently, what we saw today, in fact, was the inflation numbers were actually, lower right now.
Good.
And I've told clients this for some time now, that between now and in the first part of next year, we're going to start seeing more, basically better inflation numbers almost every month for the next 3 to 6 months. And just look at what happened today. Stock market's up over 1,200 points. Fannie Mae rates went down, if you can believe it, 0.3%.
Wow.
Just from yesterday. So it's a volatile market, but my advice would be take advantage of, the lower prices now with the intent of maybe being able to refinance in the future.
You're setting off these alarm bells in my head right now, because I'm like, wow. So the minute those rates come down, prices shoot back up.
Right.
And then a lot of my buyers who are in the market to buy are going to get priced out again.
Exactly.
And, you're kind of, I love that. Marry the home, date the rate.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that because I can see it now, and it's so funny. It's just like when we've got a property on the market and we see one offer come in.
Right.
It's been on the market 2 weeks, and then another offer comes in.
Right.
All of a sudden, now the price gets driven by supply and demand, right? That need to have it. And I always tell my clients, why wouldn't you make the offer when you know you like the house?
Right.
Why are you waiting to see if someone else likes it?
Exactly.
You've just driven the value up, right?
Yeah.
Basic economics. But the fact that you've got very good research-based information that if rates are coming down in the next year and a half, 2 years, this would be the perfect storm to buy.
Exactly. Absolutely. Take advantage of where values are now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually really good information. I'm going to get on the phone with a lot of people.
Well, like I said, I think the one that we had one down on a colleague down in Los Gatos. And when she compared what that house sold at just 5 months prior, even though the rates went up, the payment difference was less than $200 a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you can refinance that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So take advantage of the values where they are now would be my advice.
Okay. So the market's not crashing.
The market's not crashing. I mean, a lot of people will think about that in terms of the housing crisis from the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
And back then it was, there was just a lot of crazy loan products out there. Mm-hmm. The analogy I like to give is like the housing market during the housing, like in the mid-2000s, was like a balloon. And that balloon popped just because of terrible loan products.
Yes.
What we're seeing now is more just like letting air out of that balloon, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we've seen values come down some, but, it's supply and demand. I mean, once those rates come back down, I expect values to come back up because there's still a lot of people looking for homes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got friends in different areas. We've got friends in Virginia, Atlanta, Indianapolis.
Right.
So a good part of the Midwest where they're telling me they still have a very strong demand for homes.
Right.
And they're like, we're not affected by the interest rates. And of course, their values are at like 500,000, 600,000.
We want to be careful with that, right? Because as you well know, real estate's a very localized market.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And, you get places like in the Midwest or like Indiana, and those properties, they don't see a lot of appreciation. They don't see a lot of depreciation.
Yeah.
You buy those properties with the intent that you're going to slowly, just pay that mortgage down. You're not going to see significant, volatility, whereas here, fortunately in the 680 corridor, a lot of times we're the last to go down and the first to go up when the market changes.
Yep.
And of course, we're driven by, the tech sector and a lot of other different things from Silicon Valley, but we tend to, respond quickly. And,
Absolutely.
in your other areas, your Idaho's, your, Texas, Arizona, some of the areas that went up quickly during the housing crisis, guess what? They're actually seeing bigger declines.
They
and
are.
It's it's kind of the same thing in history repeating itself in that regard.
No, 100%. It's funny you said that, because I have a lot of clients. I tell them, if you're comparing New York, I would say New York and the Bay Area are very niche economies.
Right.
And with our economies, we've got most of the time 2 income earners. We've got very, very healthy salaries.
Right.
And very healthy, stock bonuses and those kinds of things. So our bubble is actually a bubble compared to the rest of the country. I had a lot of clients who were investing in Austin, and Austin was one. They were investing in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure they're fine right now, but I'm always a little weary of leaving the Bay Area because I know that the people buying in the Bay Area, they are not only paymasters, but they're people who are, they're not going to buy it unless they can afford it.
Exactly.
And you've got the people willing to pay the rent.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, that's why even in this marketplace, a lot of times people think, oh my God, people, they can't afford things. And it's like, you'd be surprised, even at rates where they are right now, that people can actually qualify for more, surprisingly. And the other thing too that's really been really surprising, just in terms of trends, I remember when I used to do loans for people in the mid 2000s, and you talk about what's your credit like, all the different things. It was shocking how many people had relatively significant credit debt. When I talk to people now, I would say 80-90% of the time I go, well, we talk about their debt. Of course, if they have car payments, but in terms of revolving debt, they go, no, I just pay it off monthly. That has been a fundamental shift. And it's the reason why people are in a better position now than where they were back then.
Oh, I didn't realize that. What do you think caused that?
Going through the housing crisis and going through everything else.
People got trained, right? Just kind of like the whole Pavlovian dog.
Well, the other thing too, it's like, our older people where maybe when they went through the Depression, like they never changed their mindset, right? And so people on a much lower level went through that, I think, during the housing crisis. It's like a lot of people suffered pain, and they adjusted accordingly.
No, that's actually very, very eye-opening. I actually recently read an article about in 10 years, 60% of the population is going to be over 60 years old. Yeah. Can you believe that? Do you think that's true?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, no, it'll be very interesting in terms of how that, trends that will happen as a result of that, and something that, a couple of things like on the horizon that will help the older generation is, there's bills right now that have a good chance of passing. And essentially, if those pass, and now get this, actual bipartisan support, if you can believe it.
I can't believe that.
If this day and age, it might be the only thing that has bipartisan support.
I haven't heard that word in a long time.
Yeah, and so what they're talking about is actually doubling the capital gains exclusion. So as you know, if you have a primary residence and you've lived in that property 2 out of the last 5 years, when you go to sell that house, if you're married, for example, it's $500,000. If you're single, it's $250,000. That comes off the top before you would pay capital gains.
But in the Bay Area, that's really not much.
Well,
right?
Exactly. Well, there's a very good chance, maybe hopefully in the first quarter of next year, that if that bill passes, they're going to double it. So if you have somebody that's, for example, been in their house for 20 years, they're equity rich, they've got this, they just bought at a great time and in a great area, and they've reaped the financial benefits associated with that. To think that they can save an additional $500,000 off of capital gains is a huge thing.
So you're saying they're going to have $1 million exemption?
They're going to have $1 million exemption potentially. And when it passes, the good news is that it's going to be retroactive, meaning that even though it passes maybe in, who knows, March, April, we don't really know. We'll be glad when it passes.
Fingers crossed.
Is that it'll be retroactive, meaning that anybody that purchased, so even though somebody closed like January 2nd, for example, they'll get the same benefit than if they did in June.